Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy and very happy to be here today. And we're here with Max Rempel. He is a PhD, and perhaps he can elaborate on that a bit more. And we've got links to his website, his Facebook, and it looks like, Max, you're working with a team. I think I have interviewed you in the past, and I didn't know whether you were working on your own at that time and you teamed up since then. It's been, I think, maybe even a couple of years since we had you on the show, but welcome.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everybody. Hi, Kerry. So I am independent. I started the way to my independence about 13 years ago, and I registered two companies. One is for-profit, another one is non-profit. And I was successful in getting some National Institutes of Health grants. So that what was like as a small business, I got some funding for my research. And I continue to fund my research myself. So basically, I'm pretty much independent. And the team is, at the moment, are mostly Russians who work remotely. We talk to them through Zoom and through voice messages and texts and WhatsApp, and that's where most of the researchers of DNA resonance are, who are interested in working for the money I can afford paying them. So several contractors work for me, like programmers, quantum chemical, computational scientists, and biophysicists.
Okay. Now, can you define the area of your focus, which we have called DNA resonance and the evolution of the matrix, but that's sort of the formal title. Can you explain what you mean by DNA resonance?
Right. Let me start with a short definition. So the idea is that within the body and between the bodies there is a communication through the field, and we call this field a biofield because it has special properties, and that biofield is in charge of creating the shape of the body and in charge of the consciousness, at least the charge of the physical part of the mind of the body. And the main idea is that DNA through resonance takes part in plays role in sending and receiving information, and through that makes the biocomputer of the body. So the DNA resonance, precisely defined, is that one piece of DNA communicates to another piece of DNA through non-chemical means, not through signaling through proteins, but directly through the field. And evolution of the matrix, the idea is metaphysical, and it's metaphysical by nature, that we are living in artificial reality, or how do we say, an illusionary reality. And this reality evolves and the DNA evolves. So the physical world we have is a complex simulation, and in this complex simulation DNA resonance plays a key role. So the soul exists outside of the matrix, of the physical matrix, but is plugged in into the physical body through DNA. And through the process of resonance, the DNA in the body serves as an interface or intermediary to connect, to allow the outside soul connect to the physical body in the matrix, and that allows the soul to get the experience living in the matrix. So this science is incorporating all the material science, which we respect very much, but also incorporating spiritual science, which is called metaphysics, and we also respect it very much. So we come from intuitive ancient tradition, and we are in great agreement with ancient spirituality such as Buddhism, Hinduism, Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese philosophy, shamanism, and many other areas of knowledge.
Okay, now I was very interested when I was reading your introduction to see that you emphasize the fact that you're dealing with electromagnetics as opposed to the traditional way of looking at DNA is through chemistry. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, when you start thinking about DNA and studying it deeper and deeper on the level of atoms involved and parts of the molecule, the DNA is a molecule. Let's pronounce it. DNA is pretty material. Here, the human body contains about 300 grams of DNA, so roughly a pound of DNA. If DNA is extracted, it's like white substance in a jar, dry substance. That's how much DNA we have. So that's a very material, touchable substance. And it is a lone polymer. We are familiar with polymers. Each letter of this polymer is a little part of the molecule is a letter. And a chromosome is a molecule which is about few million letters, and the complete set of chromosomes is 3 billion letters. It's human genome. It's deciphered. You can Google and find it online. You can read every letter. It's known. So it's very physical. Yet, when you start looking at chemistry and quantum mechanics of that, you realize this material is made of the field, the electromagnetic field. So we have to deal with quantum chemistry, and quantum chemistry explains that this, say, set of vortices in the field become material only at large scale. When you look closer and closer, they dissolve and become the field. Only when you step aside, it becomes something visible. You can even touch it, but when you look closer and closer, it dissolves and becomes just a field. There is nothing to touch. Even the atom, it doesn't have, even there is in the middle of the atom, there is nothing to touch. It's still a field. It's something that loses the material side, also it loses time. When you go to the level of atoms, there is no conventional time. There is probabilistic time, approximate time. So the atom is not in the same place all the time. It's kind of diffused with the probability that in the center there is more width, but if you look a few meters away, there is still that atom just with less probability. So all the elementary particles, they work under quantum physical principle. And the DNA is also a quantum physical and quantum chemical object which behaves in a very quantum chemical or quantum physical waves or way. It is somewhat uncertain when you look at it close. When you step aside, it's very certain that there is a very fixed sequence of letters, but when you come close, it is diffused, and the time disappears when you are close to DNA. My publication, my theory also suggests that the DNA is something that creates time. DNA, it's not that DNA exists in time. DNA is something which creates the experience of moving in time forward. So the soul attaches to their embryo or to the DNA of the embryo, and as the embryo develops, the soul gets experience moving in time forward until the body grows and dies, and then when DNA decomposes, or at least stops being alive, then the soul disconnects and the experience of time disappears. It's not, the time still exists, but the soul is everywhere in time at the same time, right? So electromagnetics is there when you look at the molecules and interaction between the molecules. Much of it is described by electromagnetics, and we use electromagnetic field much of the time, like using our smartphones, using radio, using light. It's all electromagnetics. So yeah, a big part of biology is electromagnetics. We know that there are electrical charges and electrical currents in the body, but it's much deeper. The whole body is based on electromagnetic field principle. The whole body is made out of the electromagnetic field. There is pretty much nothing else other than electromagnetic field in the body. All the matter is made out of electromagnetic field.
Okay, so why is it that it's taken scientists so long to move from the chemical composition, let's say, of DNA to this electromagnetic nature of DNA and how it's
Yes,
affected?
yes, So that's, here we come to your field of conspiracy. I first I found Richard Alan Miller's publication of 1973, 47 years ago. So 47 years ago, he pronounced all what I just said, plus the whole holographic nature of the biology and of the DNA, the holographic nature of the genome and how the biology works through holography. It was pronounced in his papers 1973, 1975, the holographic nature of the universe and embryonic holography. It's all there. He said all of that 47 years ago. So when he said that at the conference, he was ordered to stop. His all materials were confiscated. Basically, people came, officials came and confiscated his materials, and he was silent for a while. Now I dig deeper and I find that after 50 years, how do you call it, all secret materials government which were classified are declassified. There is some law about that. So now the publications are declassified from 1963, 10 years before that, which also pronounce the pieces of the same puzzle. So the whole double helix idea that DNA is a double helical was discovered in 1953. So 10 years after that, there were first publications saying that DNA works through holography. There is a holographic principle, electromagnetic holographic principle, quantum chemical principle of biology. Quantum biology and quantum genetics were named in these first papers. They were already published in classified journals in Europe, but these were funded by America. So that was already back then, 57 years ago, already becoming clear. And already back then it became, I guess, weaponized, or at least the question was about weaponizing this. And since then it is classified. It is all part of classified world, and they don't allow it in the public.
Okay, but what do you mean when you say it was weaponized? What do you mean by that?
I can only guess, but I can make an educated guess. First, it is about being able to kill at the distance, but I mean there is many more ways to kill at the distance with lasers and stuff. It's not interesting. Second, it is about making someone sick at the distance using waves. It's a little more advanced, like it's easy to cause cancer using, say, microwaves. It's very easy. So
Okay, so you're talking about effects on DNA, but you're not talking about DNA being weaponized per se. It's being attacked. It's a way of attacking DNA. Is that what you're talking about? Because we know through SciTech, again, Richard Alan Miller is an expert on SciTech, and we do know, even through my dealings with what we call super soldiers, that you can direct your chi. So in a sense, you can actually, if you want to call it weaponize, your own DNA to, activate it in certain ways, so that what you're talking about is scalar waves being sent at the DNA of a person or a group, right?
right. No. I just started from that point. It is the most obvious side, but okay. I wanted to go right where what you described. Yes. So that is kind of trivial to just do to kill. I mean, it's too simple. But then even in Richard Miller's work 47 years ago, it was clear that this biofield or holographic field of DNA is not only for health, but it's also part of the physical mind. The physical mind is not only in the brain. we are thinking through the whole body, and DNA of the body, the biofield of the body, plays a huge role in thinking process and emotional process. And then he also wrote a paper about synthetic telepathy, how you can remotely project certain thoughts and voices in a person. And that's why I think where the most interesting side of weaponizing DNA field or DNA resonance is that it is becoming possible to connect a person to a computer or connect a computer to a person and control the mind or influence the mind first. So influence the mind and also instantly the mind of one person or the whole population.
But it's also possible to influence the structure of DNA using those same weapons like scalar waves or, as you're saying, synthetic telepathy.
Synthetic telepathy, yeah.
We might think of as AI. I'm not sure whether you cover that or not, but an AI can act directly upon, if directed to, can act upon your DNA. This it could electromagnetically affect it or through scalar waves, which would be going more into the quantum, wouldn't it?
Right. I'm trying to kind of make the story comprehensible. So just to make it clear, let's divide damaging something and controlling something. It's very different. Like you can break the car or you can drive the car. It's two different things. So just killing people is trivial. It's too simple. But I think what is the desire of the whatever secret forces that use DNA resonance technology is to be able to direct people in where they want them to go. It's very different. It's very simple to mess things up. But I think what their DARPA is Advanced Defense Agency, right? Advanced Research Defense Agency, and they are a very small organization actually, which gives very little money out, but they sort of work as a public interface with the public where they spill out some information. They propose the programs which I think were in development for many years, but now they kind of allow the public to know about them. So what they say is they are very interested in connecting the human to a computer or to the technology so they can, for example, control. That's what they specifically spell out for several years now. It's more like for about 7 to 10 years, that they want to be able to control soldiers on the field, their own soldiers, through technology. So if the soldier has a panic attack, someone in the center or the technology somewhere can pacify the soldiers, make them be able to continue fighting. So to stop the panic attack. So that's the desire. It's not that something they claim they have developed, but that's the money they put out. They want researchers to be able to stop the panic attack, make the soldier work and do whatever they're supposed to do. And when you think about that, if there is the remote control of a person, they also possibly would be interested not only controlling their own soldiers, but the soldiers of the enemy, causing the panics, causing them to give up, and also controlling the generals and the leadership of the enemy. So the leadership would do whatever. So controlling everybody on the surface would be an interesting approach. And I think DNA resonance would allow that as well.
Okay, so you're saying they're going to aim their weapons at DNA, at the either in the scalar or the electromagnetic spectrum, because my understanding is scalar is different from electromagnetics. Isn't that right?
There is the term scalar wave is frequently used in our field, and it is used in many meanings, so there is no simple, I cannot answer it like one way, but often it's a substitute for fancy electromagnetic waves which have unique properties. They are still electromagnetic, but they basically electromagnetic wave, a simple one is a sine, a very familiar way. But when you start structuring it, it can become a very complex in structure. It can have a very complex structure. And sometimes standing wave, which doesn't move, it just stands in place. It's called scalar wave. Sometimes it's more complex. I'm a chemist, so Richard Miller might explain better, but that's the question I ask to many physicists, and I get different answers. For some of them, it's very simple, but basically, lots of researchers in biofields use the word scalar waves to describe the biological waves, which possibly is it's a good term, but again, when you start looking at details, it splits into many variations. What I want to pronounce very clearly is that it's not all material, it's not all catchable by devices. We have a lot of demonstrations that the spirit world is very real and there is something outside of the matrix, and when we deal with the DNA resonance, DNA holography and biofields, there is a lot which can be done here and a lot that happens outside of this matrix. So the emotion, what is called in metaphysics and in traditional Eastern biology, it's called astral body or ethereal body or mental body and so on. These are outside of our physical world. We can communicate to that, we can heal that, but it's outside. So there is a lot of effects which happen remotely independent on the distance, suggesting that it is not simple electromagnetics. There are, like remote viewing, can see, a remote viewer
Signal non-locality.
in California can see something on the other side of the planet. So, and it cannot be explained by simple electromagnetics. So,
okay, in remote viewing, it would be called signal non-locality.
yeah, non-locality is perfect, yeah. Okay. So in addition to scalar waves, there is a lot of non-local effects.
All right. I guess I'm using scalar wave in the, you're familiar with Tom Bearden and his work?
Yeah, a little bit.
So, well, I see scalar waves as leaning more towards what you would call the quantum level, because they would be, it's not like, it's multiple. It's not just one or two. It could be, expanded, as you say, much more complex, simultaneous, and so on and so forth. So that takes it outside of just the basic electromagnetic realm. But I guess what I'm really asking is how, let's say a weapon is aimed at a group or a person, you're saying change behavior. Are you suggesting that they are using electromagnetics simply, or are they using more what I'm talking about in terms of scalar waves to affect, to cross that signal non-locality, in an immediate sense? And then also, are they doing it through resonance or disturbing the resonance of a DNA pattern, for example? Or are they sending a DNA resonance at the target? Do you know any of these things that I'm asking?
Yes, great questions. Not that I know all the answers, but that's at least something I wanted to talk about. Yeah, my sources are very limited. You're connected to all the secret world, and I'm down here using my intuition and reading books, and I know a little. I guess I have to start with the sources. So my main source is channelers. I started a channeling community open, all I do is open, like as soon as I get some information, I publish it. That is my protection. There is nothing that is hidden here or here. All I know is already published. So whenever I get a piece of information, I publish it. We do all our channelings, we publish them. Either we do it live like that, we do channeled sessions, or we record it and within a week it's published. So there is nothing hidden. So they're not interested in me. I guess this is the evil forces, because I'm just, I am working for them. Not that they control me, but I'm claiming, and I'm actually working for everybody. My work is helping to everybody. I'm divergent, but my key of my research is to decipher the resonance language of the genome. The sequence of the genome is available. It's letters, AGCT, 3 billion, but a huge part of it is a record of resonance, how the hologram functions. And although these guys, secret scientists, work on that for the last 57 years at least, I don't think they understand the language. I think they're still crudely like using a hammer instead of a microscope. They don't understand the language. To be able to understand that resonance language, you have to be free in your mind, and you have to be enlightened. You have to be meditating and working with the universe, in agreement with the universe, to bring that understanding of DNA resonance code to the humanity. So, and they are marching to the orders, and they're restricted by all their secrecy. So maybe some scientists ever discovered, but I don't think it was incorporated by the secret evil people. So, when we discover that, it becomes, I hope, that's my main idea, to discover it and publish in such a way that it becomes a property of the open humanity, not of the secret projects. But they will, of course, benefit from that as well. So I'm doing that on my own time, on my own money, and I'm building a community of researchers of DNA resonance, trying to discover the code. And we're making great progress in seeing the traces of resonance in the genome. And one of our recent discoveries is that we understand that mutations in the DNA are not random. They're also affected by resonance. So depending on the environment of the sequence, we look at the resonance properties of the sequence of DNA. The mutation of there would be in a specific place, and in a population, certain mutations are preferable because they resonate more harmoniously, I would say. So your question was,
I'm sort of wondering what they're targeting when they...
Yeah, what they are targeting. And
targeting, in other words, are they targeting the field around the DNA, or are they actually targeting the DNA structure? And you're looking for a code, because as you say, DNA can be deciphered as these letters and numbers, or just letters, I don't know, but that's like a code. But you're saying a different code. You're actually referring to a different code.
Oh yeah, I mean, there is a so-called amino acid code or genetic code. They call it genetic code, and it is about how DNA codes for the proteins. Like 3 letters in the DNA code for one amino acid, the next 3 letters another amino acid.
But again, they're not targeting that, I don't think.
So the genetic code, the code in the genome is about less than 2% of the genome codes for proteins. The rest, 98%, we believe codes for resonance property, and that's what we try to decipher. What is between the genes, and even within the gene there are so-called introns which don't code for proteins. So these are also resonance structures. So we're looking at in between genes what is called junk DNA code. Yeah. So
is that what they're targeting? That's
not now. Great. So the question is, what are they targeting? I don't know, but based on what leaks out, I think they are pretty much, very much behind us. They have the technology to mess things up. They have the technology to deliver panic or some other emotions to the people, but they don't do that through the DNA code. They do it through messing up the biofield. They empirically, basically, you can empirically just try different wavelengths, try different patterns of light, and microwaves and 5G waves. Actually, 5G are very biologically active, so you can structure 5G waves and such, and see what happens to people. And if you get proper result, you, without knowing the principle, you still use it. So that's, I think, what is done. Again, it's very important to understand what we are dealing with. Who are they? Like the cabal, the secret military program, and so on.
Right. Well, of course. But, you know, even DARPA. Okay. So what I'm getting at here is that what you're working on is, you say you want to decipher this code, and it actually sounds like you're interested in the code of what is in between the DNA strands rather than the DNA strands themselves. Is that wrong, or what would you say? Because when you say the field, you're talking about the field in between the pieces of DNA, aren't you?
Yes and no. Yes and no. No, we are talking about the letters of the strand. The strand is a chemical strand. Every letter is about 50 atoms. So these are atoms. But I'm saying when you come close to these atoms, you realize they are not material balls which stay in place. It's a field which is structured in vortices. So it's a dancing set of vortices. It's already resonating structure. Even within one letter of DNA, there is already a lot of computation going on. And I published that. It's called about Schrödinger's mice paper. So
is the structure a buckyball of, you know, because, you know, Richard Allen Miller talks a lot about that buckyball, right? The Buckminster.
Yes and no. Basically, buckyball. I don't know how you spell it, but it was an experiment which explains that even a big crystal of 100 atoms or few hundred atoms still is a wave. And that's the same topic. Basically, they take this tiny crystal, few hundred atoms, very well, perfectly shaped, send it through two holes in a two-slit experiment, and then you get a distribution which is resembles light diffraction. So one molecule can be diffracted as if it was a wave. So basically, it is the best demonstration that there is nothing material, that we are waves and we behave as quantum objects. And quantum objects have quantum entanglement. So when we talk to each other, we keep the trace of the person we spoke. And there is quantum bilocation, so we are not in one place, we are in multiple places, we can shift in time. So that all exists, and once in a while we are witnessing that the matrix basically is not behaving strictly materially. There is a lot of synchronicities and supernatural phenomena which overlay over our lives. Yes.
Right. So,
But what answering to your previous question, this strand of DNA, AGCT, first letters are coding for the protein, then there is between the genes, and the same letters, AGCT, are not coding for proteins. They're called junk DNA, and we strongly believe that this codes for resonance genes, and we identified those. We found that they're enriched in evolution, and they're conserved between different species. So we are looking at already at resonance genes for several years and published them.
okay. All right. So a resonant gene, would that be like a mirror effect of the initial gene?
No, they have different properties. They are a species, the beasts of their own. They are between the genes, and they are, I think they're more important. They are more important than protein coding genes. They create the biofield, they create the mind, and the protein coding genes are just bricks of which all of that is built.
Okay, so you've got the DNA and you've got what's being called, I mean, I wish they didn't call it junk DNA, because that's just so...
I call it non-coding DNA. Basically, it doesn't code for proteins, so it's not non-coding. It's another biological world which I didn't invent. It's just non-coding. So,
like a molecule and like even electron, if you go close enough into electron, it's not solid either. It's space.
yeah, it's
in motion.
It's a probability field, yes.
So it's neither a particle nor a wave, right? It's both.
Yeah, it's both, yeah.
Okay, so we're the same way,
Yeah.
in essence, which is a good news, you know, because this can account for all kinds of effects, for example, like what we call reincarnation.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a big topic, yeah.
And also the Native American concept that that everything is all time and space are simultaneous. It also accounts for that.
Right. Uh-huh.
If
Yeah.
you're not a particle nor a wave, then you're not in time as we think of it. Time has to be circular or simultaneous.
Yeah, I did a few psychedelic trips. Successfully, I think I did about maybe 7 trips in the past years. In the last trip, they told me don't come again. These were the mushroom consciousness. It just told me don't come again, and basically I understand I'm not healthy enough to be benefiting from that. Whatever I needed to learn, I already learned there. But basically, when you step out of the body, the time is very different. That's what I'm saying. When you're in a body, the quantum chemical machinery of DNA drags you forward in time. When you step out, you're free. You don't have to go forward in time.
Okay, are you no longer, I mean, this is kind of an interesting idea. Are you no longer subject to the rules of DNA or the pattern of your DNA when you're outside the body, it would seem?
Right.
But
Yes, you are not. You are not.
okay, but then there's the idea of the soul.
Right.
I know that a lot of people don't know anything about the soul, but the idea of a soul is a kind of a, loosely speaking, crystallization of the essence of who you were in and are in all your different lives, right? And that at some point it's a crystallization of you, your essence, at least how it's portrayed. So in the sense, there has to be a relationship, one would think, between DNA resonance or your DNA and your soul.
Yes, there should be, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
I think the soul plays a big role in picking up the genes which it wants and mutations, variations in the genome, and it helps to create its own body, its own genome at the level of conception. And actually, much of it happens during much of rearrangement of the sequences happens in girls and when they age, that happens. But so basically by the time but basically there is multiple variants and they all combine. So basically the soul creates its own genetic by manipulating its parents, and it creates its own genome that would be most compatible with the purpose of life and with the nature of that soul spiritual body. I think what happens here in the Matrix is that what is random to us, for the soul and the spirits, they're in full control of random events. Like angels can help you to get lucky, or the best way of the favorite style of angelics to give you a message is to drop a book on the floor and open a needed page, or when you drive, you can see the billboard which spells out what you need to know. So the spirits are in charge of random events, and the soul is in charge of seemingly randomly combining the DNA of the parents. What we know from genetics is that the sequence of their person has half of the variations from the mother and half of the variations from the father. It's very clear with genotype that we can analyze it. It's used in forensics. It works. We can take it to the bank and to the court. But the way they're combined is to us it's random here physically. It's random, but to the soul can easily play with variations to make its own genome. That's my understanding.
And therefore also in theory, it could be changed in the same way.
Right. I heard and read in many places about multiple personality disorder. And that's very interesting because, and I observed, we ran, I co-founded a metaphysical community where we do channeling and seminars on channeling and retreats for channeling and mediumship and white magic. Basically, we teach white magic. It's yoga and the way you work with your own energy and you connect to the spirits, all of that we teach. So on these workshops, retreats, once in a while, pretty often we get possessions where the person opens up to the spirits. As some spirit would come to the body and the person would change and speak different language or speak the same language but would be a different person.
Right.
So I observed it several times, and for us it's like a common, easily fixed problem. We have to deal with it. We have several masters who can just come and work with that and kindly ask the spirit to leave and bring the host back. It's doable. It's pretty doable. But what I'm saying is when the new soul comes to that body temporarily, their whole behavior changes. It's like artists. One artist can play different roles. You can see it in the movies very often. They can play very opposed roles, like could be a sweet guy and a bad guy in the same body of the artist, right? So it's very clear. But so multiple personalities disorder is when it happens through the life, and it was described that when one personality is present in the body, they have one set of health problems. When another personality is in the same body, they have another set of health problems, to the extent that they have different color of the eyes. It's that much. So I suspect that DNA somehow also can be triggered, and it's not only me, somebody else pronounced that, saying we should analyze DNA in a person with multiple personalities. There should be some DNA changes depending on which soul is there.
That actually would also tend to substantiate the relationship between DNA and the soul.
Right, exactly. Yep, it's very scientific. It can be experimented, right? You can experiment with that.
Okay, but it would not. It's not accidental. It's very purposeful, and it might be the only way. It might be the only way for that to happen. In other words, for a soul to take over another body, they would have to affect the DNA, which tends to say about DNA in general, you're calling it DNA resonance. Resonance is a quality, but you might call it sort of a receptivity in the DNA and a fluidity. And again, gets back to this idea of Schrodinger's cat and neither being a particle nor a wave. DNA is neither a particle or a wave. This would explain how fluid it possibly could be and how the soul could come, and that in a sense, DNA would be a pattern. 1 minute's looking like that, and another minute, another soul comes in, it could look like that, right? The opposite, like depending on what soul came on board.
All right.
And then the physical would follow. I think the physical, they always say, is the last level. So when you're going to, coming from outside from the spiritual level into the physical is always the last level.
Right.
And this is true of disease as well. I think I might have mentioned this last time we talked, but are you familiar with the work of Richard Bartlett? Because
I like it. Matrix energetics. Yeah, I liked it.
He calls it time travel, a kind of a time travel, in which he will, like, say you have an illness, you go back right before you got the illness, and you figure out what happened, and then you just rework it, and the illness disappears. And it actually works. Okay, so you go back to right before you had it, which is a configuration, again, of DNA. So it's kind of like reminding yourself. And this may actually be the the secret to longevity as well. Because if you can remember how you looked when you were 16 and you were resonating with that, then it's much more likely that your DNA and your physical body will follow suit.
Right. Yeah, I found that yoga helps a lot. I just recently rediscovered it. I was doing it a little bit in a slacking way, but just being in a group of healthy people and doing yoga with them, like two classes a day I take, and that just changed the whole world for me, because the energy there is so wonderful. I mean, if you find a nice yoga studio and just be there, present and paying attention, that is very healing. When I was doing psychedelic trips, in one of the trips, it was, I was present in the body. I was like tripping out and coming back to the body. So that me, which was in the body, was somewhat different, because it was saying, with my voice, I was saying, this body wants to eat, and I would go, and this body needs that. So I would say to myself, this body needs that, and this body wants to pee, and this body is cold, needs to dress up. And so that explains to me that it was me, but maybe somewhat higher self or something, some sort of alien self being so my physical mind was somewhat dissolved. I was still being able to access my physical mind, but my personality shifted to outside of my body. And what also was, I noticed in several trips that I come back from the trip and the body is healthy, cured of all pains and sicknesses. But gradually, in several days and weeks, as I remember and get involved in all this paranoia present here, in all the pains present here, I just gradually get back all my pains and all familiar sicknesses. So basically, by changing your thinking pattern, your soul pattern, you disconnect from your disease.
Yeah.
I think that's a great illustration. And so basically it's not the body which is sick, it's the mind which is sick.
Yes, absolutely.
And by curing your mind, you can cure your physical illness.
Absolutely. Well, I think that maybe is obvious. But okay, so because of what you're doing, we started the conversation and with you talking about wanting to decode
Right.
the DNA in the electromagnetic sort of, it sounded spectrum, although it doesn't seem what you want to
We call it field, where electromagnetics would be part of the field. It's sort of, field is more all-inclusive. It would include physical electromagnetic and, say, etheric body, which is outside of the physical.
Well, would you call that the quantum?
Quantum, some people do, but when you start talking to professionals, quantum is something else. Quantum is...
Well, what else is it? Can you define what they think of? I mean, if Richard Allen Miller was here, maybe we should do a three-way sometime, but would he say, what is quantum? Quantum means many. Scalar means many, right? Meaning you can scale up or down. It's very fluid. So what is quantum?
Right. Quantum physics cannot be deduced from the word. It just happened historically that the word quantum came to physics when Einstein, I think, and Einstein and colleagues realized that the electromagnetic wave of light can be divided into particles called photons, so it can be quantized in a small individual particle. So light, it becomes, from the wave, becomes a particle. So that's where quantum came, quantized. And I think they invented the word saying it's like indivisible little atom of light called photon. And the whole quantum field then went way away from the definition. And as they pronounce, the most fascinating things is non-locality, where two particles communicate with each other faster than the speed of light, just because they're quantum entangled, and bilocation, and the Schrödinger principle of Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, that if you know who you are, you don't know where you are. If you know where you are, you don't know who you are, something like that. Some things you can know only part of the answer, but not the whole answer.
Okay, yeah, Richard Allen Miller loves to say you can only get halfway to the door, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're stepping in God's shoes, if you become a higher entity, then you stop understanding the physical reality, because you're outside of time, outside of human traditions. No. You think about things in higher sense. When you step here in the human shoes, then you cannot see the whole universe. You can be either there. When you trip, you can be either there. Okay, when you sleep, in the sleep everything is clear. You come out of the sleep, you can remember only a few pieces of the dream, because it's in a other dimension. You cannot bring the whole dimension here. It just doesn't work that way. You can bring only a few memories. So
okay, but let me actually challenge that. Okay,
all right.
So I think that a yogi, or someone who's very good at maybe transforming or transmuting time and space, could say, actually, that would be in a type of enlightenment where you would be both at the same time and cognizant of both at the same time. I think that's possible. Now, I understand that the principle that you're talking about doesn't want it to be possible. It says you can only be here or there. But if a particle and a wave are the same thing in essence, and they have a wholeness, then this other principle has the same wholeness. And therefore, if we were to expand our brains enough, I'll use an example. Because I'm a precog, and also because sometimes at the moment I'm having a precognition, I'm also here and now, but I'm having the precognition, and that's in the future. So I'm simultaneously in both places. And that's also true of even by locality. So you can, these worlds can actually, we see them as separate, but in essence, the universe doesn't see them that way. It's the universe allows for them to be simultaneous.
All right. What can I say? Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the art. Yeah, that's the art of bringing the higher consciousness down, and volunteer to be a representative of higher consciousness down here.
If you were to connect, okay, here we are in a body. If you were to connect as fully as possible in this simultaneous reality with your higher self, you would be doing that. When you should
right.
Self, if you go up high enough, is actually residing in God, or what we call God. So that would be the most expanded self. I sort of see it like the hourglass. Okay, so you can either, you have to be in the most narrow part of the hourglass at the same time as you are in the widest part of the hourglass.
Right. One understanding is that as you come from a trip, return here, you recreate the reality, your version of reality, from the body out. So I think what happens, that Bashar speaks a lot about that every one of us creates our own reality within the matrix. So sort of we are using the matrix as a prompt, but then we sort of recreate the reality from our DNA out. So the soul plugs into the matrix, and then creates reality as it lives. Like, there is a great analogy. There is a a game, Minecraft, and I think many games other are using the same principle. When you walk in a world in a game, in a computer game, you see as a world is built in front of you. It doesn't exist until you step far enough, and then the more and more of the world is built in front of you. So now we happen, like several billions of souls happen to be in this on this planet, and we share some common experience, but each of us has this experience recreated in their own universe. Basically, we are all of us are using Windows, so it looks like the Matrix is a software with certain prompts, or the book or the movie with certain scenarios, and we plug into that and we sort of make it our own. And there is a lot of indications that there are multiple timelines combined here. So we are using the same simulation to play multiple timelines.
Yes, and that is similar to the idea of possibly living in simultaneous bodies on simultaneous timelines, each with a different, slightly different sort of twist to them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then they also say, you probably have heard this, that there are, I think of it as, milestones or whatever you want to call them, where they cross all the timelines.
Right.
And it doesn't manifest exactly the same in every timeline either. So in one timeline, it might be a rain. In the next timeline, it might be a storm. In the next timeline, it might be a tsunami. But it's always going to have a related, sort of thing about it. It has a consistency of some kind. But what I want to ask you, because of you say you want to code the DNA of the resonating DNA, or what you're saying is the non-coded DNA. You want to code that. Is that right?
I want to decipher the resonance code of non-coding DNA. Non-coding meaning non-protein coding DNA, basically the DNA between the genes.
Okay, and you think that you're close. You kind of said that in one of your...
I don't know how close we are. You never know until you get there. We see already, basically, imagine discover a pioneer, American pioneer going to the Wild West. There is so much there, you don't know if you discovered everything or there is much more there. Until you reach the West Coast, there is mountains and mountains. So we already digging there in these mountains, and we see a lot of landscapes, but we don't know how far we are to discover the everything. We formulated the main principles, which I think are pretty much make a lot of sense. So for DNA to work as a computer, we need resonators, oscillators, the circuits, the computer circuits. And for these circuits, we need oscillating circuits. We need a charge to move back and forth in a complicated pattern in DNA. And for these charges to be dependent on DNA sequence, that's kind of very simple logic. So for DNA to work as a computer or a radio, the sequence of DNA has to influence how the resonance would happen. So we are looking at the molecule and asking the question, what is actually affected, what oscillators, what charge oscillations. So there should be the positive charge moving back and forth, different path depending on the sequence, or different cloud depending on the sequence of DNA, or positive or negative charge. And first we notice that negative charges, electrons, are delocalized, meaning they are spread over multiple bases of DNA, multiple letters. So some of them spread maybe 100 letters, some of them spread 50 letters. So there is a beginning, and then there is 50 letters, stop. And it's like a delocalized sausage, or we call it electron wires. And it's a little more complicated, but it's like a certain path which is dependent on the sequence, which is programmed by DNA sequence, but it's delocalized electron wires. And the sequence is 3 billion letters, so there's tons of them, like millions of them. Then we discovered that there are also proton wires. So the protons, which are positively charged, and they are roughly 2,000 times heavier than electrons, but it's a nucleus of hydrogen is called proton. So hydrogen nuclei called protons, positively charged. They also delocalize. They're spread into wires in DNA. And the fact that electrons are delocalized and create electron wires is common in science. We didn't discover it, we just found it in literature. The proton wires are a little bit more newer. They're like recently getting into the papers, but it's part of quantum chemistry. So they are, mainstream scientists are excited about discovering proton wires in different proteins and a little bit in RNA. Nobody discovered them in DNA yet, but we can clearly see in our computational models that protein wires are there. And the patterns of proton wires are evolutionary selected. So evolution selects longer wires of certain patterns. So we already see the traces of these essential components of the computer in the DNA sequence. That makes us very excited. So we discovered the main players there, but from going from there to the function, there is a big step needed. So to actually understand how the whole. So I guess the best ending scenario is when you input the sequence of an elephant in a computer, the DNA sequence, all the 3 gigabytes of sequence, and the computer builds a holographic image, 3D image of the elephant. So far, the scientists are very far from that. They can get the sequence of the mouse, the human, the elephant, of chimpanzee. They wouldn't tell the shape out of the sequence. But according to our prediction, the sequence of the DNA would create this holographic image. So we need to be able to model that. And I don't know how close we are, but we see at least we have the building blocks for that.
Now, I very unfortunately, I have to close this down soon because
Okay.
another session that I had to.
All right.
I don't normally have this kind of limitation, but
all right.
Today I do. But I want to ask you something that might throw a wrench into things and wonder if you have thought about it.
Okay.
Are you familiar with nano?
Right. I think nanotechnology is a very powerful development. And when we talk about the waves that are interacting with DNA, when DNA sends a wave, electromagnetic wave, a scalar wave, a bifield wave from one, say, part of the body to another, or within the cell, or from one body to another, we wonder how can it be reproduced using technology. And one simple guess is that the antennas, technological device antennas, should have the same shape as the DNA. To create the proper field, you have to have the same double helical shape. And then we started looking at, it's called metamaterials. They are used in antennas for smartphones and all other sorts of antennas for transmission of electromagnetic waves. They also use helical nanomaterials to create special waves, and it allows them to be like manifold, like 10,000-fold more efficient than regular antennas. So by shaping the light in helical ways using nanomaterial, special structured nanomaterial, they create the effects which I think exist in DNA. So DNA is not simple. I think it's pumped with energy like a laser, and it interacts with the water outside, and it creates very interesting waves, which are some of them are acoustic waves, and some of them sound waves, some of them electromagnetic waves, and some of them are undiscovered yet waves, which you can call scalar waves or bifield waves or etheric waves and so on. So by manipulating the the waves, I think you can also manipulate the DNA too. Like Luc Montagnier, following the works of Jacques Benveniste in France, they Luc Montagnier claimed, and some labs reproduced his results. Also, he never published them in full, so there is still something unpublished how they did it. But basically, they claimed that they were able to recreate the DNA sequence by taking the DNA sequence, recording it through into the computer as a wave, then playing it back to a water solution, and then adding some components of DNA that would resynthesize the same sequence. So the sequence can be converted into the wave, to the computer recording, to the wave again, and to the water structure, and then to the actual DNA, which can be analyzed, and then you can visualize it. So basically, if this is true, which I think it might be true, very likely it's true, but I don't know how likely, 80% chance, that by using some technology you can modify the DNA remotely, basically.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more to discuss about this because I think it's quite fascinating, and we probably are only grazing the surface. I know that you're working on this for many years, so it's fascinating to talk to you, and I do appreciate it. So let's have you back in the future.
Oh, thank you.
Okay? And that would be great. And I am very interested in this sort of dialogue that could also help people to transform themselves,
All right.
Really, because these concepts open up, instead of closing it down, they open up the possibilities of what is possible for a human.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that would, when the DNA resonance code is out, it will change the civilization dramatically. It would change the medicine, the biology, and also it will be the way to facilitate telepathy. I mean, the future of the civilization is to become telepathic.
Sure.
And until you understand how telepathy works, it's it's possible to develop it naturally, but it goes very slowly. But once the understanding of the principle is there, then it's like it's there. You can develop technology-assisted telepathy, and then you can develop natural telepathy much faster.
Okay. All right. So let's, again, pause this conversation, say thank you very much to you. And again, because I have this other appointment to do another
No problem.
back to back. And like I say, I'd love to have you back on the show. I'm having Richard Allen Miller on next week. So maybe in a few weeks, if you're still up for it, we can reconvene.
Sure, I would be happy to.
All right. All right. And I think my audience would love to ask you questions as well, which we don't have.
Oh, I'm open, yeah.
Okay.
Not that I know all the answers, but I always can speculate.
All right. Okay. And to learn more about your work, and
Sure.
and how you pursue it on a daily basis, et cetera. So I have many questions. I'm sure everyone else does too, and the people that will watch this.
Oh, yeah, here is advertisement. So my dnaresonance.org is about DNA resonance. Hucolo.org is my channeling community, and my books are on maxrempel.com.
Excellent. Okay, and I will put those on your page. I've already got one of those at least on your
Sure.
I have all of them. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And thank you, Max, for being on the show and for your wonderful investment.
Thanks, Katie. My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.